Mark D'Auria, the CEO of BitPro. Come on up, Mark. So, the future of GPU mining after ETH goes to proof of stake. Any estimates on when ETH will go to proof of stake? It's supposed to be a couple years ago. All right, and then next I have Philip Salter. And Philip Salter is the CTO of GDA, Genesis Digital Assets. Welcome back up, Philip. Philip's a panelist this time, not the moderator. I expect you to be spicy in this one, Philip. All right, and then we have Emma Todd of iMining. Hello, Emma, how are you? Beautiful. We need a woman on stage. Always represent. Women are better communicators. We're also better multitaskers. Sorry, boys. All right, and then I have Frank Holmes. He is the interim CEO and executive chairman of HIVE Blockchain Technologies. Come on up, Frank. And last but not least, we have Michael Carter of BitsBeTrippin. Okay, and the title of this panel again is The Future of GPU Mining After Ethereum Goes to Proof of Stake. I guess the first question should be, when is Ethereum going to go to proof of stake? But here you go, guys. Microphones, please, to your mouth, so all the audience can hear, and to our moderator.
We'll get to that question. All right, so 30 minutes, we got a lot to get to, so let's just jump into it. So obviously Ethereum, they plan to go proof of stake, but so they've been planning that since what, 2017, 16? So we're going to go over what coins GPU miners plan to switch to. We are going to go over if there's a true viability for proof of stake for such a large network when proof of work has proven to work for Bitcoin, obviously for 10 plus years. Timeline if it does happen, and the future for what GPUs hold. So let's start off on Ethereum developers' track record for missing roadmap deadlines is pretty obvious. I mean, there's literal 6 months to 18-month gaps between. I know Serenity, that was a pretty big mess when that was first announced, and a couple of the EIPs that were supposed to be in it didn't, and it was spread out. And just in general, the devs have had a track record of missing deadlines. So I guess let's just jump right into it. Realistic timing for proof of stake implementation.
Okay, so the devs have trained us pretty well to kind of ignore what they're saying at this point. I think we need to stop and appreciate a little bit how ridiculous the situation is right now. When they initially started Ethereum, they planned to go proof of stake within about a year. That was in 2015. There were tons of different coins to mine. And now we're looking at a point where this entire conference, GPU mining is part of it. There's a massive industry built up around this. They are now by far the biggest coin for GPU mining. It's not even close. And there's going to be a lot of people that are just not going to want to see this happen. And they're saying later this year. Good luck with that. I think as we get closer to this, it's going to get a lot more contentious, and this is going to take a lot longer than they think it'll take. I'm thinking if it happens next year, I'll be surprised. I think this is more likely to happen in 2023.
Yeah, I loved how you said that they don't have the best track record in keeping their timelines. I remember the one time they forgot to move the difficulty bomb, and they were like, oh wait, the network is crashing, let's do an emergency hardware. Great stuff, great stuff. Okay, now but this time, I'm actually going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think they're actually moving closer. There's been so many changes in these phases and all these plans and all this stuff. How often can you change it? So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say 6 to 9 months.
It's really interesting because, I always say past performance is an indication of future performance, but I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. They're a young, growing company, and Todd did say that, he was the only founder that's left out of all the number of founders that we have, and, he said it's important to learn who you're working with. I would say if they complete the London Current Fork scheduled for August 4th, if they do that, then I'll have a little bit more faith in them. But for now, I'm going with the 6 to 8 months too.
When we were first taking HIVE public, that was a big headwind. Was Ethereum was going to go to proof of stake, and it still hasn't happened since 2017. And I don't think it's going to happen this year. I don't think it's going to happen next year. But what I do think is that this staking 2.0 that basically took place in December shrunk the supply. And if you start basic supplying to manufacturers, if you start shrinking supply while demand is growing rapidly, you get an exponential price. So last year, Ethereum far outperformed Bitcoin. The same thing this year. And so I have the theory that just like the halving had a big impact on the supply side for Bitcoin, the informal way is basically people taking all the coins that we sell, 5% leave the system. I think it's like 12% of supply has gone off to staking to earn an income. And I think it's just going to drive the prices higher. HIVE has made a bold decision. We just purchased made a commitment for 66 million chips, $60 million of chips. We spent $20 million upgrading our system this past year, and it's made us extremely profitable as we expand our footprint in Bitcoin mining. And I think that when we're fully finished, that we'll have about 5 exahash of capacity converted in mining Ethereum. So we're very bullish. But what we've done to hedge that is buy NVIDIA chips. Chips that allow us to pivot into high performance computing, that allow us to pivot in the growth of the cloud, and the growth and the demand that is so big for data centers. You saw what took place today. I mean, the multiples being paid for future revenue to 2023 is 5 times the revenue. That's more than Bitcoin mining. So there's going to be a huge wave of data center needs like Starbucks, and that's our long-term vision.
Well, I'm going to take it from a little different approach. So from measuring when this is going to happen, I look at where are they at right now, and they've created an annotated outline, at least on the ETH2 side, of what the merge looks like. The ETH1 team has been very public of saying we're going to get through London, which is August 4th, and then they're going to take a look at it at each client level. So they have essentially what is an annotated outline with not a lot of detail on the specification. We know that the specification is the devil in the details in that. So until they can actually get a specification out there that we can actually look at and see, okay, this is how the merge is going to happen, I think it's going to be a lot longer than anticipated December. I would say at a minimum, more like probably another year as they start to understand that. And they still haven't reconciled the fact that once they go live, you still can't withdraw from Beacon, which is going to put another supply crunch also because now all blocks that are being mined are going to be just locked up. All that extra, ETH is just locked up. So their incentives are not aligned if you're locking up, if you switch over to proof of stake and you don't have a withdrawal function on the proof of stake Beacon side. So there's going to be, why would they ever move it over? You'll just have all this stuff going into Beacon, and then you're going to have this derivative market set on top of it, right? If you want out of your node, you'll just sell your node to somebody else. So I think the incentives are a little misaligned there too, but we'll see as the specification comes out.
Yeah, and I think actually Vitalik might have tweeted that he already knows it's going to be 2022. I vaguely remember, so I think it's already been delayed. So yeah, I think it's on that. All right, so I think we all touched on it a little bit, but what effects do you guys see this having on the community, marketplace as a whole? As Michael was saying, there's going to be less supply. Frank and Michael, it could make the price go up, hopefully, but there's also going to be coins stocked for 365 days that cannot be touched, 32 Ethereum batches, which is another issue because the little guy isn't going to have 32 Ethereum, and then that puts a centralization on the pools that can put that in for staking. So will price be affected? Regulatory concerns for being reward-based algorithm dividends. Is the SEC going to be involved? Are they going to give that? They initially called Ethereum and Bitcoin not a security, but is this going to change that? Will Ethereum transaction make a smooth transition, or will destroy functionality beyond repair? How is this going to affect the marketplace and community as a whole?
I mean, to your point directly, about the incentives, it's a very strange situation where they're talking about doing merge really soon, and what is that really bringing to Ethereum in terms of scaling? Like, absolutely nothing. The scaling is all starting, but I think the general public understands ETH2 as being the solution to the high fees, but the part where it actually gets rid of GPU mining has nothing to do with that. I mean, very little. You know, so it's a very strange situation, and I think they're playing a very dangerous game with that, where if they bring this forth and they bring this merge forth and there's no scaling, I think that looks really bad for Ethereum. You know, regardless of what it's supposed to be, people are going to see that and they're going to be very confused by that. And you know, this is all happening in the midst of seeing all these other blockchains like Binance Smart Chain and other EVM compatible chains that it's starting to look like the future of Web3 is not Ethereum at the center, but it's just one node in this much larger web. And you know, their narrative is starting to fall apart, to be perfectly honest. Like, it looks a little strange, and I think, like, if I was them, you know, I would take a step back and make sure that there's at least something new other than who is producing the blocks, because I don't think the public really cares about that, no matter how hard they want to make it seem like they do. I've never heard anyone really say they actually care about that. So I think at the end of the day, they're playing a very dangerous game by releasing this a little too soon. You know, they're eager to get rid of miners for some reason, but you know, it's working just fine right now. There's no rush. I don't know why they're so eager to rush into this.
You know, I think I'm completely with you on this one. I think, like, you can be positive and like optimistic and pessimistic about this topic at the same time. On the one side, I'd be very pessimistic on the kind of security of the network going forward. I'd also be pessimistic on the deployment timeline and the scalability and so on, for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. I won't go into it again. However, the public really doesn't care too much about decentralization. The public doesn't really know why the transaction fees go up or down. Right now they're down at 0 again because of Polygon, right? Like, everyone's kind of happy again. Same with Bitcoin. There was a big problem with Bitcoin, now it's gone, no one talks about it anymore. If the Ethereum guys now launch Ethereum 2.0, and it's like this validator's doing it, and the fees are now low, the first news article will be, you know, now it's Ethereum 2.0 and the fees are low. People will be happy. I think the price is going to go up, skyrocket. It's going to jump once 2.0 actually works, regardless of what it actually means for the network. Because I also agree there'll be a bunch of centralization. There'll be like financial institutions being these validators. It's going to be not as friendly for the newcomers to come in, just because you were saying, like, who has 32 ETH lying around? That doesn't happen to too many people. And for example, like, I'm from Germany, so in Germany, for example, if you're mining or if you're buying and selling, actually you can like buy and hold for a year, and after under German law, then you don't pay taxes on it if you sell it afterwards, because it's like a long-term investment or something. But if you stake, then it's 10 years. So there's a huge disincentive then to have Ethereum investments in this way compared to anything else. So I'm not sure how this compares to other countries, to be honest, but just from my perspective, it's going to get worse for people for sure. No, yeah. So my verdict, I think the price is going to go up, but I don't see this as a benefit for the network as a whole. But at least there's some coin that's doing something else than Bitcoin is, because at least we have two clear philosophical kind of directions, and they both have a great reason to be in the space, and then at least we're seeing some divergence there, which I think is really good and really interesting.
I'm going to look at it from a consumer perspective and know that we're going to be very happy with the fees going down, because I remember in 2019, I heard Todd speak, and I remember being really pissed at the time that the fees were so high, and I was just like, F this, I'm going to go home and sell my ETH. And then I was like, actually, if you can't even join them, maybe I should start mining. So, but you know, there are always these things that you can think about it from the consumer perspective. They're going to be very happy that you lower these. Also, they'll be able to, you know, use this on their laptop, and so they're not going to be requiring all those large mining. But I think it's going to be really good from a consumer perspective. Yes, there are other things that we have to worry about, but I think that overall,
I think some of this sort of green movement that's been taking place, in addition to going after Ethereum, is Ripple. And Ripple has a very, very strong strategic plan of deception that we're all bad for the world because we're using lots of energy, and if you tweet certain things, all of a sudden your little robots come out and say something else. So I think they've got their PR machine working on it, and they're desperate. They are not what we are, but they have an incredible marketing machine. So I don't think it's going to change for what's taking place, all their antics, but it's really a big ripple that's trying to make a wave, and I think it's never going to become a tsunami.
I think some of the confusion in general with ETH moving over to the merge is people are keeping that synonymous with like ETH 2.0. And at the end of the day, they chose to move the merge up, right? Which is just the consensus, right? That's all it is. They're holding out on doing any of the sharding or any of the ZK rollups, which is the scalability for ETH, which provides value down to the folks that are building the dApps. And the different applications, DeFi, we've seen a lot of transactions there. Polygon kind of stepped in, launched, and we saw in May one of the largest transfers. It's not covered that much, but it was one of the largest scalable transfers of all the dApps in DeFi over to a completely different chain that happens to be complementary to ETH. But I think it actually paved them a little risk avoidance of people getting caught up around you needed to shard first, right? Because now you got Polygon, you got fees back down, you're looking at block, the amounts on the blocks about 2.5 ETH per block now. It kind of took the wind out of the sail at 1559. There's not going to be a surprise. There's not a huge amount coming out of 1559 when it comes to the miner and yield, because a lot of that's already been pulled out. But to go back to your question on the functionality and standpoint, it's like when they switched that, they kind of lost the ball of what the purpose of ETH and what they were trying to do from an EVM and a growth standpoint on features and functionality and utility. I think that once they get through that, if they do get through to switching over to POS, that should obviously be the focus to build out that base layer for people to build applications on. It's always been the mission. That's why I started mining ETH and following ETH originally. A platform, this concept of a cloud type of platform that you can build things onto, and it's all been around the money and the drive of that. And I think that right now the proof of stake has a lot of proponents on it to move it over because of the green energy movements in general, the ESG conversation. There's a lot of power being used on that. So I think we just kind of lost the ball a little bit on it, but once we get through, I think EIP 1559, the real messaging will start to occur, I think, from that specification, and really what needs to be the focus on their plate.
Yeah, even as a GPU miner myself, I'm a proponent of 1559. It prevents miners from gouging people for transactions, and obviously Polygon with the dApps has really helped the network in general with regard to network fees. Transaction fees. So it sounds like it's maybe not split, but the timeline is a little different on everyone's opinion. Do you guys see a possibility for the devs being swayed to a consensus-based proof of work, proof of stake, or is this it's already set in their mind? This is going to be it's pretty well known that there's going to be a fork, most likely, and a proof of work Ethereum coming out of that. Even though Ethereum Classic technically would be that, but that's obviously from the DAO back in 2016, the DAO hack. And do you guys see a proof of work fork happening, or is it swaying the devs to do a consensus base and have some blocks proof of work, proof of stake? How do you see the outcome? Is it set in stone, not going to change, it's going to be proof of stake, consensus between the two, or it's just going to fork and there's no way around it?
Okay, I'm pretty confident in saying there is a 0% chance that the devs will go back on this. Believe me, I've tried. They're just not interested. They're 100% behind proof of stake, and I think that anyone that thinks there's a chance in the world that a proof of work fork will be called Ethereum, I think there's a 0% chance of that. That being said, I do think there will be a proof of work fork. They do talk about this as the merge, but I really think people are going to need to start thinking about this as the fork, because right now, it's really like, I feel like I'm in the twilight zone where Ethereum is incredibly successful. It is the #2 blockchain by a very long shot, and it's working just fine, it's scaling just fine. There's really nothing to fix here. It's just the stakers were promised that they're gonna get this blockchain and they want it, but there actually isn't a problem here. And so I think that enough people are going to see the risk inherent in making such a massive change to something that just works just fine, that there's going to be enough behind a proof of work fork as we get closer to it. No one's really talking about it now because, you know, the mining's pretty good. There's no reason to make waves right now, but as we get closer to it becoming a real clear and present danger, I guess you'd say, I think you're going to see a lot of talk of it, and people will understand there will be a fork. I mean, a lot of people have a stake in this happening. It's going to be the biggest airdrop of all time. Coinbase is going to love having another coin to sell. You know, there's a lot of people who want this to happen. There's a lot of people who don't, but there's more than enough that do that I think is going to happen.
I also agree that if there's a proof of work fork, there's no way it'll become Ethereum. It'll be another Ethereum Classic. And I think there's no space in the space for 2 Ethereum Classics. So my thoughts on the, let's call it new Ethereum Classic versus normal Ethereum Classic is that this fork would be a mining community fork. You can't have just the miners doing a fork, right? Back in the days, BitBeTrippin tried, they failed. So this is not possible. And the Ethereum community is very much a GPU community. I don't think that the ASIC miners, which are in support of Ethash, have a chance to compete against the GPU miners, which want to switch to SHA-3 on ETC. So I think if there's a fork, it's going to be very short-lived, and ETC, I guess, will by default just get some of the hash rate from Ethereum. But unfortunately, I think that the people that have the Ethereum ASICs right now will not be able to support a new fork just for the ASICs.
This is actually a question I was looking forward to because everybody that I know is totally they're looking for, you know, POS, proof of stake. No one's looking for proof of work. But I was like, this is an interesting question because I couldn't see anybody who was really, you know, for it. So I'm definitely not for it either. It just doesn't make sense in my book. And that's all I really have to say about that. So I'm going to keep this conversation going though, because I really want to hear other viewpoints on this one.
I think it's just going to evolve, and smart people will try to figure something out that's better, and I don't get worried about it. I share with you, we've had a big correction in the difficulty rate, correct? But nothing compared to Bitcoin. So that means Ethereum is more decentralized and has a much broader. And so it's much more difficult to pull when you're so decentralized with 30,000 scientists basically around the world, it's such a big ecosystem. And to get them all day one to march left and then go right, I think that's going to be extremely challenging. So it will evolve, and there'll be lots of stories back and forth, and it's the capacity for us as miners to be able to, we're doing is hodling, so the day that we have the stake, we're going to get an income from it. But until that happens, you just got to be in the game, and that's my thoughts on it.
Take this on a couple parts. One, I don't think anybody's going to fork, and if they do, I don't think it'll be very short-lived, just because you don't have the developer support there. I think Ethereum Classic has probably the best to gain, followed up with probably something which is right now around the #2 spot, which is around Ravencoin, which a lot of the GPU guys can go over to. There's a few others, Ergo and a couple others, but the ones that actually have the liquidity are Ethereum Classic and Raven. I think there's going to be a lot of signal to noise around that time when the proof of work, proof of stake switches are happening. I think CoinDesk, CNBC, everybody's going to start to cover it. Everybody's going to be asking the question, where's the hash rate going to go? From a decentralization standpoint, I absolutely agree. I think we didn't see a huge pullback. I think the peak was about 650 terahash. It's pulled back to about 487 terahash. I mean, that's about 18%, but I think that's just the size of pie at the A10 Pros and a lot of the ASICs that were set in China that got powered down with a lot of those other plants. So that was about 18%. And that was at a time when ETH was still profitable all the way up to 15 cents per kilowatt, so it should have went up, right? The hash rate should have went up to about 750 terahash, but it pulled back as that order came out. So we did see about a 200 terahash drop. Now that made it a lot more profitable for some people, but you also had Polygon taking most of the fees, and you had this, natural effect of yield being decreased at the same time that you had something cut. So I think at the end of the day, it shows right now. I think that's what we were looking for. What's the size of pie on the GPU side? It looks like it's around 400 and some odd terahash, right? So when ETH switches over, that's what we're looking at from a standpoint of what's moving over to these other coins and can they affect that. And I think that's where we're at.
All right, I know Michael needs to. Oh,
I was super curious. Does anyone know the percentage of ASICs that are doing Ethereum? What's the, the probability of
the ASICs on ETH hash network? I know Christine Lee said something about over 30%. Michael probably has a better.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of analysis. People trying to look at the nodes to see if they can find some kind of, like you can see Bitcoin when it's running out of block, you can start to see kind of that metrics. Anywhere from 30 to 40% was what people expected. What we've seen so far is about 18 to 20%. At least that came off from the stuff that's in China. Now that's not saying that there's not ASICs running somewhere else. I mean, there's a lot of other areas that have farms. And then if we're seeing a ramp up now on ETH's network going up to from 460 terahash up to 487, that's a lot of terahash. Is a lot of ETH. A lot of terahash performance. So like probably 18 to 20% realistically right now. Not as much as what people thought. People thought it was about 20.
Yeah, and speaking on Frank's comment of decentralization, I agree. I think ETH hash is probably one of the most decentralized, at least networks of this size. China shuts all their miners down, and there goes 50% of the hash rate overnight almost. Ethereum was hardly affected by it. I guess that leads into my last question. Probably have to be pretty short answers on this, and I know Michael has a flight to make, so hopefully we don't mess that up for you. But yes, so staking reward 6.6 APR, it's 32 Ethereum, locked in for 365 days. Little guys aren't going to be able to do this. There's going to be a lot of pools. There's going to be a lot of big groups that take groups of 32 Ethereum, and they're the ones that put it out, and then they bring people's Ethereum in little pieces, and they're the ones that pay out, so that those people don't need to have their Ethereum sitting and they can't mess with it. I mean, if you put your Ethereum in and it's $1,000 Ethereum, and then 3 months later Ethereum gets 10 grand, you're going to want to pull it out. So you're going to want to be in a pool. So it's going to be very centralized. So how do you guys see the centralized nature of pretty much the big holders having control of this network affecting it? It's going to be hard to do short, but.
I mean, I personally think it's going to be a nightmare. It's just, if you look at the economics of proof of stake, it's just the rich get richer. And what's been great about mining is that anyone with a GPU, which is literally everyone with a laptop, could at least get involved. And if you look at the history of crypto, the #2 coin has always been a GPU mining coin. I don't think that's accidental. I think it's because GPU mining really brings a lot of people in, and I think if Ethereum doesn't want to dance with them, then someone else will, and they're going to benefit greatly from that.
All right, last chance to say something. Yeah, I actually think that the centralization caused by proof of stake is not going to be noticeable at all until someone attacks Ethereum. If someone attacks Ethereum, worst scenario would be that someone maybe attacks Ethereum and you're not sure, and people start calculating metrics how probable that was. But I think it's going to be no effect. I just want to use the chance to say one more thing. I think that once the GPUs can't mine Ethereum anymore, we've seen this 3 or 4 times. There's been like cycles. The first was Bitcoin, then came Script, then came Dash, then came Ethereum. And every time we had this mining farm running through the whole thing, by the way. And not Bitcoin, but Script. And we always thought, okay, this is the end. Now we have to turn them off. And always the GPU community found a new coin, and maybe because of that, pushed it up and made it into a serious coin. So I'm still kind of optimistic, let's say 50-50 or something, that another coin will emerge that will replace Ethereum as the de facto GPU coin.
I find this, I wish we could have longer. Why are we only 30 minutes?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot to do here. 30 minutes was, they're lucky Michael has a flight.
what I'm really hoping is that, they try to figure out a way for the security, because if someone just happens to, simply be here, that would be absolutely horrifying. And just the security is one of the things I'm really, really worried about. So I can sort of see if they have like, it makes it good like but I think that to your point, it would be an absolute mess. It would be an absolute mess. Absolute mess, and that's really worried about.
I'm not worried about it. I'm just worried about getting my machines plugged in and making sure my electricity is cheap. And this is a very dynamic growth cycle. And you just have to be super curious, fleet of foot, pivot like you're an NBA player. And that's how you're going to score in this game, in my opinion.
I think it comes down to how that secondary market plays into it. And if there's going to be participation for the small guy to get in, and and it could be $1 billion industry that's not touched right now, but that interface, how to be able to stay here and become part of it. Right now, one of the biggest allures being the GPU miners, especially for the home guys, the people that just want to dabble into it, they get lost on the internet, they find maybe a YouTube channel like mine or something, and just start mining, and it turns into something bigger where now they're here running a small company. I think if you can create that kind of environment in proof of stake where people can take a dabble, get lost on the internet, go and try it one night, and get that experience, if they can replicate that with proof of stake, I think that's what we're all trying to find. ETH is the largest, it's the biggest, that's why SOLminer and a lot of the other ones don't have the critical mass that Ethereum does. Can Ethereum create that a second time is the question. The question was, are there going to be staking pools? Right now I think there are, but I think it's kind of a it's not that sexy of a thing right now. It's just kind of like, I can just enter in some money there, and maybe I'll get it back at some point. But I think, it's all in the delivery there, where it makes sense, user-friendly, that thing.
All right, looks like we're out of time.
There are several staking pools, and we get asked all the time to post up our coins, and the most recent was, well, we won't have them as collateral, but you'll earn 2% a month. I find all that difficult to really believe you're not going to take my coins, and I want to keep them as virgin coins, because I believe this stuff is art. Like Andy Warhol, I believe that your Bitcoin total as virgin from 10 years from now is going to be worth a lot more than the coin that trades in the street.
Total that virgin Ethereum. Thank you, Frank. All right, everyone.